Hey there, and welcome to my video on the weapon refinery update that was just announced. My favourite part of every FEH update are the weapon refines, because they're quite exciting if they're characters that you like to use. They're all very good, typically, because they give 3 and 4 star units most of the time a niche that will separate them from the other 3 and 4 star units that are similar. And for 5 star exclusives and Grail units, Tempest Trial and Grand Hero Battle units, it provides a reason to invest in them with your rarer resources. Because if you're going to go for a heroic Grail project, unless it's a character you really love, then they need to have something to offer that will be useful to you. And if they're like Narcian here and come with an Emerald Axe, then it's unlikely that you'll want to invest in him without this boost he's getting. So yes, as for the characters, we have Siegbert, Gwendolyn, Leon, and Narcian, of course. And these are all units I feel could certainly use the weapon refinery update this month. And through the course of this video, we'll have a look at each of them individually, see what their stat lines are like, what they come with, and what might be the best thing for them based on the sort of builds that we can utilize their stats with, and hopefully come up with some ideas that might best suit them in this new update. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, first up we have Siegbert, the only 5-star exclusive of this bunch. Now Siegbert has quite frankly disappeared since he came out, and that's probably because of Ares and base Eliwood. You see, most relatively speedy sword cavalry units run either Gale Force or some form of burst damage set, usually Gale Force. And Eliwood's Blazing Durandal was almost designed for his stat spread because it gives 10 defense and 7 speed, which is perfect for base Eliwood's stat line. Ares has a special spiral slaying edge sword, which with distant counter vantage works really well with Bonfire. So Siegbert, as a 5-star exclusive that costs orbs to merge, has quite a lot of competition. And since those other 2 units were in the 3 and 4 star pool, it's easy to see why not many people bother investing in Siegbert, because with a Swift Sparrow weapon, which pales in comparison to the other 2's weapons, he doesn't have very much to offer as far as being a unique unit. His stat line is low in res, like most cavalry units, middling attack, pretty decent def, and decent speed. That isn't too overkill actually, it's quite a nice level of speed to work with. So his stats are quite alright, it allows him to run Gale Force effectively, as you can see in that build. His weapon I've already discussed is not the best, but Swift Sparrow isn't rubbish, it's still useful. And then all 3 of his inheritable skills are only available at 5-star max. So while he is a 5-star exclusive, and this doesn't really matter, if he was to demote to 4-star, he wouldn't actually have any fodder worth talking about. So not much to say about that. His Gale Force build that I've done here utilizes his weapon a little bit. The lull attack speed isn't necessary for the speed per se, but it is quite nice just to keep a consistent doubling, and it also reduces the opponent's attack without making you deal too much damage. Because of course as a Gale Force unit you don't want to hit too hard, because if you one-shot the enemy you're not proccing Gale Force, you need to hit them twice. It's a hit, get hit, hit again, proc Gale Force type situation. So if you have too many attack points then of course it's not going to proc. This is why you can also go for a res plus IV. It helps his bulk while maintaining his attack through attack res solo, and the lull helps with the heavy blade proc. There's a lot working together in this build, and I feel like he's just a solid Gale Force unit. Again though, the reason why he's often never seen is because Eliwood has just as potent stat line for the Gale Force set with the Blazing Durandal refine. So if I was to suggest any kind of improvement to Siegbert's weapon, since he's the only character here that already has a pref, it would be to boost the stats gained to give you 4 to all stats, or to give you something like 5 attack speed res, the res helping bring up his bulk in the res stat a little bit. Again, all player phase. And perhaps for his actual refine, on top of the base effect that's just been improved, I would suggest either Heavy Blade built in, this gives him versatility in his Sacred Seal slot, or if they wanted to go for something a bit more unique, they could go with a new effect, which would be Hone Heavy Blade type thing, where as a Hone skill, adjacent cavalry allies will gain Heavy Blade as a status effect type thing, much like Armor March or something, so that whenever they attack, their cooldown is increased if they have higher attack than the enemy. This is good because most cavalry units that run Gale Force need the Heavy Blade seal, since I don't think they can run Flashing Blade. And this limits your options if you like building cavalry units and you have more than one Gale Force or anything like this. It's quite a pain switching the Heavy Blade seal around. So having a refine that can grant Heavy Blade to allies for a turn would be really handy, and it would set him apart as a unique unit that plays both a support role and an effective Gale Force role, which would differentiate him quite a bit from Eliwood, who's mostly just in it for the Gale Force procs. But yeah, quite a lengthy one on this character, but that's all I really have to say for Siegbert here. Still a good unit, just outmatched. Next up is Gwendolyn. Now, Gwendolyn is one of the only 3 and 4 star armor units available in the game, and that provides her already with a fairly decent standpoint, in that there isn't really much competition. Her strongest competition is Valbar, though since Valbar came out so late, most people had already built their Gwendolyn if they wanted one. And since Valbar's quite recent, it's unlikely he's going to get a refine anytime soon. So this month gives Gwendolyn quite the opportunity to stand out once again as a solid choice for merge projects. A lot of people built her already due to high BST. Being a free armor unit is quite useful for arena. If you give her premium skills, to this day she still scores fairly well. I believe she surpasses the 170 BST threshold, so it's certainly worth using. Now, her skills, all of her skills besides her weapon are available at 4-star and below, which is quite handy. Her lance can be upgraded at its 5-star state to be a slaying lance, which I use in her special fighter build on the right. As far as her stats go, she's got a decent mixed bulk, alright attack, a bit on the low side, very good HP, and a middling but salvageable speed stat. And now all this is to be expected from a unit that was available more or less from launch. And if I had to give her a refine, it would be something that would work well with Special Fighter. Because as you can see by this Special Fighter build here, her speed can be used. If you think it's too shaky or that it's not enough with your team support, then I'd recommend running a res refine with quick riposte Sacred Seal, so that she can still run Special Fighter, since in my opinion armor units are best ran in Special Fighter settings, because if you use Bold or Vengeful you're locked to either player or enemy phase, which can be good, but Special Fighter gives you that versatility that Bold and Vengeful don't really provide most of the time. The Bond skill can be used on player phase if you use a unit with Guidance perhaps, or Aerobatics, or if you're an armor unit and you're in Armor March mode anyway. It's actually quite easy to keep people together in armor settings. So perhaps for her weapon I would suggest a Slaying Edge or Slaying Lance base effect, and then for the refine perhaps have some stat boosters. For example, if foe initiates combat grants 4 attack speed def res, something as simple as this would be really useful. Works really well with either Vengeful or Special Fighter, even Wary Fighter. Something along these lines would be really good for her. So yeah, not as long as Siegbert's section, but in a nutshell, it's hopefully she'll get something with a slaying effect that works well with the Special Fighter build, because even now, today, in 2020, she is a solid unit that can be used quite well in a variety of settings. Here we have Leon. Now, in contrast to Gwendolyn, Leon actually has quite a lot of competition. Infantry colourless bows, we have Virion, Klein, Gordon, and in many cases Jamke, if you're looking at Grail projects as well. If you're looking for a support unit, then Virion and his Refine are quite hard to match. Virion has a really good HP stat, which allows him to easily sudden panic his foes, and also grant himself +4 to all stats, which on his already decent stat line is rather good. That, and you have Klein, Gordon, and especially Jamke are some really good Brave Bow units, either for their stat line or the weapon they come with. So for Leon, I decided to go with a more defensive set that looks at the close counter side of things, which, apart from 5-star exclusives like Innis, there aren't too many, besides maybe Norn, that can run close counter very effectively. Now, while Norn has the superior stat line, it's worth noting that it is unlikely Norn will get a Refine for a very long time now. So giving Leon here something that works really well with close counter could really help set him apart. As far as his kit, he comes with Ignis, Speed +3 and Guard. Sadly, the only one that's available at 4-star is Speed +3. The other two need to be 5-star. Now for Ignis this doesn't matter too much, since it's available on other units. But Guard 3 would have been nice to have at 4-star rarity. It's quite hard to get at 4-star rarity. I don't think there are any at the moment in the 3 to 4-star pool that have it. But it would be nice if that was a bit different. But it's not, and Speed +3 isn't very great, so fodder-wise there's nothing really to say here. Slaying Bow's nice, but Brave Bow is probably the best inheritable option of a bow, unless you're running close counter like this set here. So this set tries to balance bulk a little bit while maintaining a speed stat. It works especially well with Brave Lucina, of course. If you're not running Brave Lucina, then you may want to run a different special, or instead of Special Spiral, use a lull skill. Lulls are really good to either help his speed. If you use a lull attack something, you help his bulk. Lull Death will help his damage. There's a lot of different options you can run in the B slot that will certainly help him. And if you want to ditch speed, you can run a quick repose seal or something, that also works. But if I was to give him a Refine, I'd maintain the slaying effect, since that works really well with specials, and then go with some form of enemy phase something like not close defense, but maybe granting, like how I said actually for Gwendolyn, 4 to all stats if the foe initiates, or a guard effect. Well, you know, he already comes with guard, so maybe a breath effect. That would be quite nice. It would be like Spectrum Breath, where you get 2 to all stats plus special cooldown, -1 per foe's attack, something like this, on enemy phase. So it'd be like Steady Breath, but boosting all stats. That'd be quite nice for close counter. It'd mean you wouldn't have to rely on Brave Lucina either. You could run other characters like Base Marth, who can provide buffs to all stats. There's plenty of options. So yeah, as far as Leon goes, I think that would probably be what's best for him. And last but not least, we have Narcian. Now, while Narcian boasts a rather mediocre jack-of-all-trades, master of none stat spread, he doesn't actually have too much competition for what he has to offer. Most axe flyers we get are usually Shursh, but again, we have Shursh, Jerome, and Har, who are all pretty much the same unit. And then the only other free-to-play axe flyer that's worth mentioning is young Minerva, who of course is really good. So while young Minerva is really good, Narcian here has a noticeably higher res stat than her. Not to mention that he costs half as many grails as Minerva if you've kept all the copies so far. This is quite handy to know, and if he gets a really good Refine, it's likely that he will be equally worth investing in if you have the fodder and the merges. Of course, it's unlikely he will match Minerva, because Minerva is just that good. I honestly think Minerva is one of the best axe flyers we've ever had, and the fact that she's free is quite hard to compete with. But Narcian here is a lot cheaper if you've kept copies. what he comes with isn't very impressive at base. He's got an Emerald Axe, which doesn't even have a refine, which doesn't make much sense to me. He's got Vengeance, which no one really uses. Lancebreaker, which is okay for Arena Assault if you're looking for checks. And then Savage Blow is available on a 4-star Camilla. You know, there's nothing really worth mentioning here. He does have Vengeance and Lancebreaker 3 at 4-star, but again, it's nothing to write home about. If you're building Narcian, it's definitely not for what he comes with. That being said, though, his stat spread is good with merges, because the one thing about these Jack of all trades, Master of none type units, you've got Legendary Fallen Robin, you've got the base Robins. They're really good examples of this type of stat spread, whereby at base they're not very good, but once you get to high merges, high investment, they suddenly go from Master of none to Master of all, with no huge weaknesses. Again, though, given that they're balanced, they don't really have a high enough speed stat, nor do they have particularly good res on any of those examples I gave. So, thankfully, as a flyer, Narcian does have access to some skills to help that. Now, Faithful Axe is really underrated weapon. It is essentially a bond skill in a weapon that boosts all your stats. It's like an L-tone, but better, really, because you don't have to rely on lots of people next to you. You just need one, and that one can proc not only Faithful Axe, but also your A and Sacred Seal slot in this case. Aerobatics and Guidance allows you to consistently have one person stood next to you, so you can boost all of his stats, making him really strong, balancing his res to 42 next to his 41 def, which should then become 44-45, I believe. Then his speed goes up to 38 with the seal, 41 with the Faithful Axe, 47, which is what I like to call the optimal stat. I think that's what most people agree, at least, which is really nice. And then his attack's obviously being boosted quite high as well. So there's a lot you can do with Narcian's stat spread at max investment, not to mention you've still got Flowers to consider. That's one extra to all stats. He's got an alright HP stat, he's got decent mixed bulk, he's got decent attack. He has quite a lot going for him at this stage. As a refine, I'd love to see a Faithful Axe equivalent, maybe with aerobatics built in, because at that point you could run something else in your B slot. The only problem is, as a flyer, he doesn't really have anything else to run as a B slot, because flyers don't really have much to play with. That being said, though, it would be a nice addition to his weapon, because you could run maybe even flyer formation, so you could run him multiple teams. I'm not sure that would be quite worth, but maybe even a bond skill would be nice. Just something that works with a Faithful Axe type setting, I feel would be best, given his stat spread. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Narcian. Solid unit at max investment, kind of shaky when he first starts out. But if you give him enough stuff, he can certainly be really good. This build right here with those stats is actually quite better than it looks. He's got enough speed and he's got plenty of mixed bulk, so certainly a lot to work with there. So, that's about all I have to say for each of those units. I do hope that they get something good. All these units could really use something that would help them stick out from the crowd, and even Gwendolyn could use something useful, with Valbar now being a thing, and newer players will just go for him instead if they realise that he pretty much has the exact same stat line but better. So yeah, hopefully Narcian won't get stuck with an Emerald Axe type thing. That would be a bit sad. Gwendolyn and Leon both have a decent base weapon as a basis for their refine, being Slaying. That's always a good base effect to work off if we're looking for their own personal weapon, because Slaying effect just works with so many things. Siegbert could potentially be really good. It's just he has so much competition in weapon and in availability that it's unlikely that, unless he gets something really good and really unique, that he'll actually be able to stick out from the crowd enough. So only time will tell with these things. But that's what I think about each of these units. I hope your summoning's going well. I'm looking forward to Golden Week. Hopefully that'll be good. It might be a bunch of Hero Fest with summoning tickets, which wouldn't be too bad, but it'd be nice to see some orb-related stuff, I think. But yeah, I hope you all have a good week, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good one.